always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. The girls, they accepted me.
Hi, and welcome to the Fluid Voice. I am Ozma In The Dark, utilizing she, they pronouns for the purpose of, shit, I didn't think of a purpose. I am here with Christy. How are you?
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm utilizing she, her pronouns for the purposes of winding up the conservatives.
I mean, fair. James, you appear to be making some sort of noise.
Sorry about
that. Joey, since I asked you first, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I use they, them pronouns. And my purpose is, I don't know, world domination.
Yeah, I tried that a bunch. It hasn't worked out.
Well, no, I need my pinky. I'm the brain.
Of course.
There. James. How are you?
I'm okay. Let's see if I remember this properly. I use he, him pronouns for the. I didn't come up with a purpose because I didn't know there'd be one, but yeah.
To be fair, I forgot. Or two. I thought I had. I thought I had one. Usually, I can think of one on the fly. Not today. And here. Here we are talking about inclusivity and pride because it is still important and it's always going to be important, and pride tends to be either pride sometimes excludes people depending on the year and depending on the pride.
Seems to be also depending on the area too.
You mean geographically?
Yeah. Like, well, I haven't been to Tacoma Pride yet, but I know Seattle's really kind of a richer area. So if you're not really from there, it's like, you're not really going to fit in if you go to their Pride.
Yeah, pride in my area is really, really white.
Pretty much the same here.
Which there's not a shortage of having two-spirit people around. It's just that they don't come into the same areas together. It's almost as if the race being there as a barrier is stronger than what you think would be overcoming that and seeing each other more as, people.
Funny. Yeah. That sounds like a radical idea, Joey. Even maybe revolutionary. I don't know.
It's almost like a lot of pride started with a fair amount of much more inclusive areas, and then all of a sudden the inclusivity started to become more excluding.
Yeah, because I can see, like, even in big cities where class would be an exclusionary, like, you're still going to encounter, and and ableism, like the
Yeah.
ableism in Pride is notorious. Like if you can't walk along with everybody and keep up the same pace, you know, you're gonna literally get left behind.
That's where I was gonna go with this, because I had to duck out more or less for reasons of not having the ability to walk it and not having an alternate way of going. But
Yes.
and that was, but it was kind of, it was kind of last minute, but it really, and it's better than when it used to be somewhere else in the city that was really inaccessible to wheelchair or alternate transportation. But it's so it's and I'm going to make some excuses first. And I was asked to join to march with to go with a smaller group than the larger trans pride here. So I wasn't asked, don't come with us. I was sort of like, oh, it was nice to be asked by this other, but with no accommodation, it was kind of like, well, shit, now I'm blowing everything. So, which is not their fault. It was a last minute thing, and I kind of just, but I'm not gonna. That's as far as I'm gonna make excuses for anybody. I am very benefit of the doubt person, as everyone knows. But the fact that they can't get their shit together on this is kind of like.
I mean, arguably, my position is just that there needs to be more accessibility as a default. People shouldn't be able to only get around places when they're at their best, but in any and all situations, or whatever, at their best, for like the people who are physically non-disabled or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just a lack of accessibility screws over everyone. But that, technically that applies to inclusivity as pride as well.
Yeah.
But, I personally am way less aware. I'm mildly aware, like I'm aware of the discriminatory attitudes with regards to race and why some pride places end up like super white, but like I don't fully. I have a very much lack of knowledge in terms of why.
That's
No, that's a really. Oh, it's okay, James. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just touch on this really quick. I'll try to be quick. But that's one of the main reasons why I went to two, and unfortunately, I had friends who maybe lived around Seattle, so I went to the Seattle one. But they were like, women. So it's like, well, I don't really look like someone who has gay guy friends or whatever. But anyway, so it's like, if you don't look a certain way or you don't have a certain perception about you, you don't get included by, the people you might want to meet, right? But the two experiences I had were pretty much me being tuned out until I left. Just ignore that person until they go away. They don't look right, kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, so I don't need to be here. Cool. It's like, I don't know. Something I don't understand about the disconnect is like, cool, there seems to be a disconnect with people where it's like, You know, people go to social environments to ignore everybody and be by themselves. Like, you could do that at home. That's just me. I don't know.
Okay. What about what you were gonna say, Joey?
I spaced what I was going to say. I was listening to James.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That was bound to happen.
Why? Well, the original question I was asking both of you was about why it seems to get why Pride sometimes gets segregated by race.
Oh, I was just going to comment that was actually a really good question to ask. And probably the one that needs answering, because if we can figure out exactly why that happens, we can undo it some. Like, I don't know what is the solution? Do enough people of color need to like make a little solemn pact that we're going to go invade white people pride? Like, and just go, you guys, we're here and we're queer too. And you're going to have to just learn how to deal with us.
Well, I mean, it probably would help to go, was it, like a famous Marsha P. Johnson, clip of, her going to, gay pride when it wasn't, like, trans inclusive and just yelling at everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might need to happen.
It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was Sylvia, not mine. And you.
Yeah, James, something. We're hearing a lot of clunking and clatter.
Yeah, I'm looking for something. I should have my mic, but of course, I don't have a mute button on these headphones. So if I step away from the thing, I have to have the phone.
Well,
with me and hold
there's
it.
a mute button on
Let
Zoom.
me mute my thing here. Yeah, sorry about that. Let me go ahead and mute.
Okay. Yeah. In the initial days, because we were all lumped in together, this is one of those things that they did that you people are taking on the people are taking on the transphobes talking point, which is that, oh, it was never about them. They were never part of it because it was always about gay rights. No. It's just that gay rights covered everybody at the time.
Yes.
So it's more complicated. But yeah, she was yelling because they wanted to exclude trans people.
Yeah.
And she was not having any of that shit. Which, as it should be. It's the same fight. It's the same history.
Yep.
We will all go down together, so to speak.
That seems to be what's going on right now. It's something I started to notice. I'm not 100%. I think it might be the rhetoric. I'm not 100% sure because, well, you know, in regards to like trans exclusion, you have a bunch of people who are pushing talking points about that, about like, oh, it was never about trans people, it was about gay issues or whatever. It was about the civil rights or something. And then there'll be like people being more aggressive, talking about keep out the T and supporting people for putting their money. But you know, there'd be like rich people in our community who are putting money behind people who want to keep out the T. Or
yeah, but I feel like that at this point that's a relatively that's like a vocal minority, and the majority of people saying stuff like that are like probably straight or
Yeah.
whatnot, because a lot of people, especially now, at least in America, I don't know as much about the UK politics, because I feel like that's a lot louder over in the UK than it is in America, because I feel like conservatives are just like flat out, we need to decrease the number of trans people by whatever means possible type talking points. And because of that visibility, that particular type of visibility, and there's also anti-gay stuff going on at the same time, it's a lot harder for people to get that argument working now.
I'm kind of wondering if it's a similar thing in regards to race, though, because, well, obviously you have the same racial attitudes that you have in the queer community that you have in the straight community, right? I can't necessarily, well, I don't know exactly why that would be the case.
Well,
To be perfectly honest, but I'm kind of wondering, like, I'm kind of wondering, like, how long it's been like that, or if there was a turn that kind of made that more aggressive. I'm not sure. I think you could probably answer more to that, Christy. I'm not. I'm kind of spacing on answers.
The white cis-hets have never had to assimilate.
Well, yeah, there's that part.
So every time you get a minority group, every time you get a minority group, and again, I'm part of those, but like I can move amongst the whites without them knowing. When you got your three factions, you got your separationists, you got your assimilationists, and you've got your militants. Now, I belong amongst the militants, but so the assimilationists, they don't want anybody who stands out,
right?
And so
that's a lot of queer people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like a lot.
So assimilation would be to minority would be Clarence Thomas, people who judge for gays, and that insane.
Are you talking about like representatives for assimilation?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
And what's her name? The one whose name is completely escaping me. Thank
Blair
goodness.
White?
5 minutes.
Blair White, Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, Caitlyn Jenner. Thank you.
Okay.
We even lied about ever knowing trans people, and she dated Renee Richards.
I'm something else.
And you've got your militants, which is us. We're here, we're queer, get used to it.
Yeah, integration over assimilation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you've got your separatists, which are unfortunately a lot of the people who survived.
It sounds like it might be a lot of separatists in regards to race still.
Yeah.
Well, then again, there's like the colorblind thing as well.
That's almost more annoying.
And it's also like, it's the colorblind thing, because like when you're dealing with, like, when you have people, excuse me. Well, the colorblind thing, well, for me, it's kind of like a principle or misrepresentation of actual peace. Like, I'll just, there's like actual peace where like there's actual peace and harmony, and then there's like quiet conflict under the surface, but like nobody wants to say anything because they don't want to seem like they're disturbing the peace. Like, I kind of wonder if that might be going as well, in regard, in connection to the color blindness where it's like, okay, well, black people are being like treated a certain way in the gay community, or Asian people are being treated a certain way in the gay community, but they can't really, anytime they say something about it, oh, well, you're bringing up drama, you're bringing up issues, or you're being, you're being negative, or well, that could connect to toxic positivity too. But I think the colorblind thing might be a big part of it, to where it's like, oh, okay, well, everybody's the same, and anybody who's bringing up any issues about it, or is just trying to cause trouble rather than bring harmony. So I don't know.
Well, intersectionality was supposed to merge all of the but it does. It can if people want it to.
Right. For me, it sounds like a big it seems like a big like conflict avoidance. Like, instead of people just like maybe hashing out the issues or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh, well, let's just avoid talking about it. So unfortunately, that means that you can't that you can't deal with people who are maybe more confrontational about it, or maybe they want to get an issue straight, rather than try to act like it doesn't exist, which means you can't talk to certain people because if they, if especially if their bullshit tolerance level is down or low, because it's like, oh, well, this person's not going to let the friend that I've had for 20 years just say all kind of racist, like, sideways shit to them without checking them. So, now it's disturbed the peace or caused conflict. I can't have that because that's going to bring too many negative vibes to my positive world. I got to cut these people off, right? So it's like it's like a kind of a, I don't know, maybe more like a nice prejudice. I don't know what else to call it. But it's kind of like, oh, they're being prejudged to where, oh, well, this person might cause conflict or mess up my social circle, so I don't want to. I don't know. I think that might be part of it.
I mean, that might, but I'm wondering if it's also sort of like there's a particular. I know I might be bringing this up from the leftist sort of thing, but there are certain leftists who are like, oh, I realize that capitalism is bad, and therefore I have solved all my discriminatory problems. And I wonder if some people in the queer community are like, oh, I understand this one aspect of white supremacist culture I've been conditioned into, this heteronormative white supremacist culture that I've been conditioned into. I must understand all of it or whatever, so I must not possibly be racist, for I'm a part of a marginalized group too.
You sound kind of... That sounds kind of like that sounds kind of like the same stuff well, you don't hear people like Vosh say that, but like, it's kind of a...
No, you're too busy hearing Vosh drop a tactical N-bomb.
Yeah. Well, that, and like, well, apparently he's... I don't know, apparently he's within the community as well. Yes. I don't know, he's bi or pan or something like that. So yeah, he was like, well, I'm part of the marginalized group too, so I get to, I don't know. We do seem to have a lot of, well, maybe, I don't know what they call the white savior or something like that. But I think that might be connected to what you mean in regards to like, oh, well, I understand this part of white supremacy, and since I know that, I can speak for everybody and be the one to kind of quell any like people of color who are advocating for change, because, well, I'm the one to do it since I understand it. I don't know.
The people that I have always historically trusted the most to speak on behalf of a marginalized community that they are not a part of are the very same people who would never ever claim that they could.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of relates to like the people who are maybe the smartest, who understand that they have more to learn. So yeah. I think that's pretty solid. That's kind of the way I always that's kind of the way I always picture it in regards to like people who speak for others, where they're just like, well, I'm not an expert on this, or I'm not, I don't know everything there is to know. I can learn more, but as far as what I know, here's what's going on with this. I've listened to these people in this community, and I've talked to these people over here, and they say this, rather than being the one person to speak on it.
Yeah, and who on a list can you even name as are people that could speak on intersectionality, like from a like actual professional level, sort of like they've done their studies in it. They've, literally written the book on it.
Yeah.
Like that list is very small.
That's what some of the stuff I was reading into. One of the classes I had where I was reading a lot of that stuff in regards to like, colonization, cultural responsiveness, stuff like some of the pedagogies and stuff like that. But a lot of that stuff was like maybe from the people who wrote scholarly journals or wrote books on it. Yeah. But I know that's not like a lot of people. A lot of people are more like me, where it's like layman's terms, or like we have a really, really novice's understanding of how this stuff really works.
Well, I mean, there's also the classist element of you need a degree to know something, which isn't always the case with everything. You can't necessarily define every element of
Right.
what you've studied so simply. So it gets into this whole complicated mess of just who do you trust with regards to learning stuff.
I think there's kind of
and in what? Because you've got different people are experts in different things, and so you might be able to trust this person with your favorite foods. They've always got the best, most kick-ass recipe ever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't trust this same person with being there when you're down. They're one of those good time friends. Whereas you have other people that are friends because they are the person that is there when you're down.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the things I learned is that I cannot move. I learned young was I cannot move in a couple of the communities I belong to because I don't fit it. And that's okay.
I'm still working on that, Chrissy. I'm serious. I'm working on that a lot because, that's the thing that, for me, that's another thing too. I think might be in connection to the racial tension and some of the other stuff we were just talking about. Because there's a lot of stuff that kind of, I don't know, maybe goes back to those roles or maybe a cookie cutter format of how you're supposed to be if you fit in a certain demographic or a certain subset or a cohort of the community. For me, it's kind of the same thing. I don't necessarily we were talking about standing out and stuff like that. So it's for me, I kind of stand out in a different way. I'm a bigger black dude, so it's big scary black dude, whatever, right? But there's that part, and then there's reverse queer issues. I don't necessarily go out of my way to present as queer because I'm just a guy who, I'm just a guy who's pan or whatever or bi. So it's I'm not, you might know I'm in the, of any queer persuasion based on people I might be looking at or I might say I find attractive, but other than that, I'm not going out here looking like Prince or something or half of the queer black representatives you'll see in the movies where they're super, they do everything to where all the, I don't look like Herbie Revelis or whatever, whatever, or others who kind of stand out and they really are flamboyant like RuPaul and all that stuff. So it's a lot of those people who don't necessarily fit it, or they don't go out to the bars and clubs and all of that stuff. They don't necessarily fit. So it's they're going to get tuned out, right? that's another thing I kind of struggle with as far as not, I'm still kind of like, well, I've only been out for 10 years, so it's like I still struggle with that, with that, I guess, I don't know if conundrum is the right word, but like, that dilemma is like, okay, I'm not necessarily okay with this, but I'm kind of learning to be okay with it because it's my lot.
Yeah,
if I were to camp it up, people are going to know I'm faking. So
I can move somewhat among Hispanic people if they know me. I can't move amongst the Black community because my experience with discrimination is entirely through what I've observed, how my mother going through life more than me. And it's one of those, it's always been a tension, not a tension. It's been more, okay, well, this is who I can and can't speak for.
Yeah.
And regardless of where I belong.
I think it's funny you mentioned that part about not being able to move within the Black community. I'm Black and I can barely do that. But that's kind of like in regards to like cultural upbringing and stuff like that. So that's a little different.
I can't socialize with anyone, so.
Yeah, I'm socially awkward like motherfucker. So it's like, yeah.
Well, it depends on how you were encultured.
Yeah.
It just depends. Like I've felt a lot more acceptance among Lakota people, and I don't know.
That's one of the things we had an issue with. We were talking about, and it kind of came down to like how we were cultured, really, which is interesting.
Yeah, like when you're raised Lakota, you're kind of in a subgroup, in a subculture where you're still encountering the dominant culture every day. But there's this subtle subculture that you are experiencing that other people are not. And when I would go, quote unquote, back home, back to the lands that are my people's lands, I experienced a feeling of acceptance, but people like my little sister didn't as much because she can pass.
Yep.
Like she looks like she could be a dusky hued white woman. And so like she can pass, and it makes things different. And that normally accepting people suddenly treat people different because they don't see a Lakota person, they see a white person, and you have to note that's my sister. You have to correct them, and then they go, oh, well, that's different then. But that initial feeling of you're not one of us, that is very much a part of how it feels to be othered by just about anybody, because I can say that that's the same way I feel at Pride. When I've tried to go to Pride, I feel othered like that.
Well, there was one thing I thought about mentioning earlier. Well, we were talking about class and stuff like that in regards to Pride and like queer culture. We have a thing up here called the Seattle Freeze. I don't even know if that's still a thing, but like, well, basically it's like, well, you got people talking to each other like on the apps like Grindr and Tinder and all those, but like there's a lot more people who seem to be openly out in Seattle versus like I'm 45 minutes away in a kind of a poorer city, or a city that's not as rich. It's still a city, but it's not as rich. So it's like, well, it's kind of like 45 minutes away. It could be an hour drive, could be whatever. But it's like also there's a class issue, it seems like, or a disconnect where it's like, okay, well, people from Seattle who might connect with people or bond with people for a short while on the apps or through whatever social profile that they're able to connect with on, and then like they kind of learn where they're from, and it's kind of like, oh well, maybe they find somebody in their area they could talk to in Seattle, and they don't talk to that person anymore. They just kind of just cut them off without saying a word. Like I've noticed that I've experienced that a lot, and there's been some other people I've talked to who kind of live around here, who kind of deal with that from Seattle days, especially. I don't know if it's a thing with just guys, but it seems.
I am not super aware of that. I will mention the time is counting down, so I probably will need to refresh this Zoom meeting. So I will do that now, unless there's something you want to pop in quick for the last 3 minutes.
Yep.
No, now's a good time.
Everybody else?
Yep.
Just pop that up and turn the flag off. And there we go. Coffee, boing, 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 boing. I know, oh. Okay, if you've alone, and just, okay. All the messages are good. I was going to bring up one thing real quick since it was brought up more, because Context Wrench brought it up in chat, but there's so much good conversation going on about visibly disabled people were never intentionally included in Pride. That's Context Wrench's comment from earlier.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yep. Unfortunate, but true.
Yeah.
So I forgot to mention. Well, there was something else I was meaning to touch on when I was talking about like the Seattle Freeze and stuff like that. But directly connected to what Joey was talking about before we reset the Zoom here. Well, I've noticed that anytime I've gone to I've been, like I said, I've been out for like 10 years or so. I think the only time I really was able to connect with any gay people in a gay bar, was like when I was like kind of around the time I was leaving the military, and I was part of a support group. So the people I was with were the only people I could connect with. But like anytime when I came back home to Washington State and like went to the bars out here in Seattle, it was pretty much the same thing where I just like, I could sit there for like an hour or two and nobody's gonna say anything to me. Like I don't know, like I don't belong there. And then I go to Pride, it's the same thing. Or I'm just kind of walking around and people are just tuning me out. People are amongst themselves or in their cliques or in their groups or whatever. It's kind of the same thing. I go to Pride another time, it's kind of the same thing. And I felt like that through my whole college, my whole program through college, or actually both, with like just kind of in general, but especially with queer folks. It's just kind of like, well, one, I'm not even their age, so it's different that way too. So yeah, that level of othering I've noticed as well.
I mean, that would make sense for a couple of reasons. One, people expect some sort of significant difference from typical to stand out to some degree, whether or not that's really a part of your personality. And two, I assume in part to a variety of factors, some of them due to white supremacist culture and some of them just due to racism, that they assume all black men are straight unless they present a certain level of them.
Well, that's another thing too I've noticed, where it's like, there's another thing that's an issue within the black community that I've noticed even more since I've been out. Is like a lot of the talk from black straights about anybody who's queer in general, but especially like, we're kind of the primary or one of the main ones being used to push this narrative of, there's this gay agenda being forced on our kids and all this other stuff, to where it's like, there's homophobia and all kinds of transphobia within our community as well. So it's like there's this toxic element with us, to where anybody who's, there's people. I don't know if that could be connected to catfishing in a certain way, or luring to, like, but like there's that as well, to where it's like, people who kind of present more straight, or present mainly as straight, or straight acting, could be perceived as threats. Like, that's something I actually just thought about. So it's like something, or just kind of remembered, because, if they're perceived as threats, they might be avoided or whatever. Because it's like, that person might attack me or something. Well, they don't look like, they don't act like RuPaul, so they might not. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense as well. It's just one of those things where it's also contradictory, because people should be themselves at Pride, which involves a lot of different people. Ideally, like part of the whole point of Pride, I felt like, was that people are supposed to be themselves. So I can see how that contradictory element can show up, and like, I understand people wanting to do stuff for their own particular safety, or what they feel is safest for them. But then again, I also don't know how much of that is the racist element.
Yeah, I kind of
Black
think
men are perceived as more dangerous, so
yeah, there was basically was kind of, I was about to basically touch on there, like that whole the whole big scary black man thing. Because of my size, it's kind of imposing. So it's like, I can understand why certain people are just kind of like, yeah, let me stay away from that person. They look kind of.
yeah, because I'm pretty
Well,
sure.
I think another part of it is people just don't know how to break barriers.
Yeah,
Like,
it seems like a big disconnect in that way. I could definitely relate to that. It seems like there's a big, like, that, and like, America itself especially is very individualistic, and it seems that there's been more of an increase of like individualistic, like, rhetoric, like, you need to do all this stuff yourself. Even like the concepts of self-love and self-improvement and all this stuff has just kind of been misconstrued or used differently, to like basically like use that as an excuse to keep people by themselves.
yeah. Yep.
Well, you mentioned like there was a post you made, I think, where it was talking about the hierarchy of needs, right? And like since I was talking about this with my friend, it seems like the basic thing was basically kind of getting yourself taken care of or getting your basic needs met before you could, like, if I'm getting this right, you get your basic needs met and then you can help take care of your community. And it's kind of more of a, I don't know if it's a process more rather than a, I don't know, like it's all connected or like a cycle rather than just a kind of a step pyramid thing. I don't know. But like it seems to be a whole lot of that, and it's like all of the individualistic like messaging kind of forces people to kind of like, I guess, resist the need to communicate with each other or be connected with each other or actually break barriers. So like, oh, let me stay by myself. But I don't know if I'm getting. Am I making sense on that, Joey, or did I kind of take your point somewhere else?
No, that's totally what I was trying to get at.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like steal the words out of your mouth. There's also like kink shaming as well. Content Wrench brought that up.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shout her out on that. Well, there's the discreet thing as well, but like kink shaming is another big thing that disconnects.
Yeah,
people.
although, and to be fair, there's also just structurally cities are built to not really in such a way that they don't really foster communities, and part of it is like the focus on roads and whatnot, versus like people and places to walk to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there
like,
should be more parks.
Quote unquote walkable cities.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Joe. You were.
Oh, I was just saying there should be more parks. There need to be more areas to sit and chill, have people gathered in even, not insignificant numbers to chill in that same area together. Like I think of Central Park. The way people use the park is it's a communal sort of usage where everybody kind of feels responsible for the park.
It's we have on the other end of New York State where I am, we have Delaware Park, which is designed exactly like Central Park, except part of it's now a cemetery and part of it's now a museum. Just depends on what bones you want to see, or whose bones. And it is very communal in the summer. It's Buffalo, so summer is what we get. That's roughly where Pride was starting this year. So I think it should end at Pride. It should go the other way. But that's a parking problem.
I think people like kind of to riff a little bit off of what Isaiah put in the chat, where he put, well, the goal of capitalism is not community but profit.
Yep.
Which is absolutely true. And it behooves capitalism to keep us as individuated as possible. It just does. The more we are kept from organizing, from forming communities, strong communities, the more they are, enabled to do whatever it is that they want to do, which is squeak the very last dime and effort out of every single one of us.
Well, I kind of wonder if that's connected with the, well, of course you have people who, I kind of wonder if that's connected to like how, I don't know, like I don't know if it was an accident or if it was intentional to kind of make like, look like the design of like social media. Like I'm kind of wondering if, like if I kind of wonder if that might have been because these places have to make a profit, and part of that is like keeping you on it. Part of that is like keeping you on the app as much as possible and stuff like that. Especially like dating apps. Like it seems like okay, well there's the facade of like, oh, we want to bring people together, we want to connect people, we want to make people able to date or whatever. Maybe they're shy or whatever, and maybe they can only talk online or whatever. It's like it seems like, I don't know, there's something that kind of made that stuff more isolating rather than like actually unifying. And I don't exactly know why.
I don't know. It seems like the more automated things get, the more impersonal they get.
Yeah.
That just is like, it's a byproduct of it.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that I've encountered, and it's one of the things people have against intersectionality, and I'm bringing this back around to the earlier point, but I'm including what we've been doing in this last few minutes. One of the things people have against it is, well, that just divides us further. But to be perfectly honest, to find places where we do intersect and our needs intersect is both individualistic and communal. And it's intersectionality makes its own community.
Well, that's what seems to be like, back to the Maslow thing and the original concept. That's what seems to be like the original concept that Maslow's stole from, basically. It was kind of like, it was like a combination. I think that's the word I was looking for. A combination of individual development and community development was the original concept. Am I getting that right, Joey? Because I know you were the one that shared it, which kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's what it sounds like was like the original concept, and then Maslow's got a hold of it and flipped it kind of different, and then of course Jordan Peterson got a hold of it and really made it really fucked up. So
let's not go into Jordan Peterson. I have a vendetta against Jordan Peterson because I have actually read some genuinely helpful stuff written by some genuinely well thought out psychological stuff by Jung, and I have read Crime and Punishment and love that book to death, and so I have a personal vendetta against Jordan Peterson because he does not understand Jung or Crime and Punishment.
There were some other stuff relating to that. Little context wrench and Isaiah are just preaching in there, because they're talking about like capitalism and stuff like that. Context wrench brought up like redlining, like I brought up gentrification because that's another big thing.
Yeah.
And of course that doesn't necessarily. I don't think there's a coincidence that a lot of the that a lot of the community is pretty much kind of run by like cis gay white dudes who are rich and live in these areas. You hear this thing about how gays move into an area and the property value goes up, right? So it's kind of like there's that gentrification element too.
Yeah, and that also
the family is your family.
I'm sure elements of that also intersect with the way towns are set up to segregate, like,
and of course
indirectly. Like I can go, I think it's just, I don't know, 5 miles up, 3 to 5 miles up north. Like where I am right now, it's relatively integrated. Like 3 to 5 miles up north, it's like almost all black people and people of color. Like, it's very clearly, if you're in the areas, it is clear that there are like visibly clear about the segregation elements, but there have been, I've heard plenty of stuff also about that.
And of course, that also, that gentrification also like carries over to the communities that are even online. I've noticed, or even like when we were talking about like kink shaming and stuff like that. That even like screws over those particular things too, where it's like, or there's networking sites that exist where people can talk to each other and share the same kink or whatever. Even that is like connected to that. Yeah.
Yes, which also shouldn't. Kink shaming is something that shouldn't be in Pride, and it's important for the intersectionality of Pride. For there's to be not kink shaming at Pride.
And we've talked kind of more about the community divisions that kind of screw over the whole community or make it more easier for the community to be kind of picked off as a whole because everybody's just kind of divided. Like that and like the stuff we've talked about is like really I'm spacing, sorry.
Well, it's one of the interesting things about the way things are here is, okay, Buffalo, and this time I'm just including Buffalo and its 2 primary surrounding communities. For you, primary, not the whole of Buffalo, which includes Niagara Falls, which is its own thing. It is one of the most highly segregated cities in the nation, but the areas that aren't segregated are really not segregated. Where I live, for instance, it's very Benetton, and I live in a middle class neighborhood. All the gay bars are very close to each other near downtown.
Nice.
Which is not a zoning thing, but it's just that they're each for a little bit different thing. But the one that isn't is the lesbian separationist bar, which is a dreary place.
That sounds like it's just bad news right there.
Yeah. You still have the yuppie gays, which I don't go in their bar either. But I'm accepted in the older queer bar and the younger, and I'm a member of the Queen's Court in the big community, so I can go in.
There's a thing about age too, which I've noticed. There's a thing about age too that I've noticed in regards to like places you can go. Like I said, like the school that I just went through and hopefully can graduate from this quarter was like it was like that. Like I think I was probably, if there were any other queer people on that campus who were as old as me, I never saw them. But like I'm 35, so. But like anybody else who I've noticed were queer or had any kind of like, well, because of course there's like feminine straight dudes and masculine straight women, right?
Yes, I'm not the youngin' anymore. No.
Right, exactly. But basically, like anybody who I noticed was queer or like had like were in their groups or whatever, or groups among friends, they were like in their younger 20s or whatever. So it's like, yeah, well, no, I'm not going to try to go to talk to these people. I'm going to be the old weirdo trying to talk to these people about anything. I can't even bond. I can't bond with them.
my generation kind of got mostly wiped out. So,
Hmm.
Which is its own thing.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah.
That's I was like, do I want to talk about this? No, not at all. But yeah,
Which is why Pride is important, because Pride is a happy event, and we are
It's
Pride
supposed to
Month.
be a happy event. I mean, that's what gay means, right? But that's another thing. It's supposed to be happy and stuff. That's the thing I noticed too. Where it's like, okay, well, when I did go to Pride, it was just like, not only was that, I was like, I was getting tuned out, like, just kind of made me feel like I didn't need to be there, or I couldn't be there, or I didn't belong there, because it's like all these long faces. I'm like, what? Like, okay, so people were like, okay, they cheer for the floats or whatever. Like the time I went, freaking Macklemore was there, and I think George Takei made an appearance. People cheered for that, but then of course when it was like the general thing, it's like, okay, people were just kind of in their areas, and like people were just kind of like doing whatever, and like all these long faces I've noticed where people were just kind of like, they seem uninterested. Like maybe it was the heat, I don't know. Also, like you'd have some people who had some happy faces, but like mostly it was like people who were just kind of maybe on pins and needles. It's like, this is not happy. This is supposed to be happy. What's going on? So it's like a disconnect. You got the loud like club music and the guys in thongs on stage and all of that stuff, sort of doing whatever, and then like got people in the crowd just kind of sitting doing whatever. They don't really. It was like, it seemed like nobody wanted to be there or needed to be there. So I'm like, this isn't, why do it's like again, like I said, kind of in the beginning of our conversation, where like I was talking about, like people just kind of went out here to ignore each other and be amongst themselves. Like you could do that at home. You could just have a pride thing at your house. Like, why do you need to be here? I felt the same about the bars.
I mean, to be fair,
when I was there,
I have never been to Pride. I'm like the worst.
I probably shouldn't have gone, but then, I don't know. I think it's like the thing with the bars too. It's just kind of like, well, you show up at a bar. If a new face walks into a bar, you would think somebody might want to like maybe include them or something like that. Or like, then again, I know it's kind of a conservative thing where it's like, well, people don't know other people, so they're naturally either gonna stay in their groups or not talk to the new person.
Maybe it needs like activism energy more. Maybe that particular Pride. I don't know every Pride.
That's something that
Isaiah was mentioning the Pride in Tallahassee being relatively vibrant. Maybe it just needed more either activism energy or like I almost want to say convergence energy, like nerd partying energy. Like there's a particular nerd partying energy that's actually like really good. And to be fair, there's also a lot of queer people in, and
I think a lot of this
kink acceptance in nerd communities.
I think a lot of this is due to complacency, to be perfectly honest. Like, well, so especially around the time that I started to try to like engage with my home like area in regards to Pride and like the gay bars and stuff like that. There's like, well, there was some level of civil rights gains we got. Like, well, it was kind of around the time that gay marriage was passed and like some other permissions were covered or whatever. So it's like, it's like, I think it might be a level of complacency because it's kind of like the post-racial stuff where it's like, oh, okay, well, there's no more racism, so we don't have to act anymore. There isn't there isn't a president who's ignoring our an AIDS crisis or something like that, so we don't have to like be united because we don't really need to, like, there's no need to like stay together and try to all that stuff. Like, I don't know.
Well, Well, I'm hoping that what's about to happen to the LGB part of our alphabet soup, I'm kind of hoping that the next step that's going to happen is they're going to realize that the T being under threat, the way that it is,
everybody's under threat.
Means everybody's under threat, and that they are literally one step away from coming for gay marriage again.
Oh yeah, that's kind of a thing that I'm noticing too, and I think that's
because I'm
also,
getting tired of the way that trans people are being excluded. It's ridiculous.
I think it's well connected with the way that that people of color are being excluded. I think the two are just kind of hand in hand, and it's like that's the kind of a thing I've noticed, or kind of an image I have in my brain of kind of like the actual community versus what you saw on TV or what I saw around the time I came out, which kind of convinced me to do so and try to connect with people or try to build some sense of community. You know, you got this kind of, well, look at everybody together. We're so inclusive. You know, you got the Pride Parade and all of that stuff, right? But like the thing that the image that I kind of have in my brain of kind of like the actual community is kind of like, I don't know, what's the name of that graphic, which kind of relates to class. I don't know what it is, but it's like the hierarchy where you got the rich people who are basically eating up all the food while and like splurging and having all the fun, where the workers at the bottom are just kind of basically being exploited. That's kind of how I see like either black and trans people, people of color, Latin folks, indigenous people, anybody who's really an activist or has any activist energy. Like kind of we're being kind of our activism, or well, I don't even know if I would consider what I'm doing just talking in a meeting or something like that as activism, but like people who are actually paying attention, or they have some sense of what's going on, and actual advocates or activists are just kind of being exploited, while like you have some pygmies who step up to like make as much money as possible at the expense of the community, and then you have like the hot white dudes in floats who are just kind of like, you know, okay, cool. They're also borrowing from all the culture of the people at the bottom, as well as, you know, doing whatever and connecting with whoever to make the most money as possible, so they can be on top and be the ones who are seen the most and treated the best. It's very it's not a good thing that we can continue. I know that for sure.
Yeah, I will say with regards to activism gets into a lot of complicated elements, and there's a lot of like, it's the people on the ground are like just like a small part of activism, and there's like a bunch of elements. So I wouldn't necessarily, I don't want to necessarily hand wave you speaking out as not being a part of activism, even if it's to a small community, even if it's to like not a lot of people.
Well,
every time you raise your voice, it's activism. Every time you raise your voice and say, we will not.
That's true. That's true, but you know, you got the people on the ground who are just like, well, you guys aren't really doing activism. You're just doing armchair activism. When's the last time you organized a march and all that stuff? And it's just kind of like, well, you know.
Okay, I disagree. I don't think
like
it's the people on the ground.
Everybody's got their role.
I don't think it's the people on the ground who say that, because like anytime I go to a group, it's not the people on the ground who say that. It's the people who are also are sitting on the thing and being like, oh, I went to a protest. Well, I guess maybe go on the ground like once or twice or whatever, but not factoring in how the actual protest.
I went out to this thing. What are you guys doing? And then they stay on their show forever.
No, because like I am well aware, because like, so I've been working a little bit, very little with Never Again Action, and it's very clear, like, there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things that get stuff together, whether it be looking up resources, whether it be getting people together, whether it be gathering money. Like, there's so many
all
elements
kind
of
roles that you can play in
activism.
there's people who just do songs. Like there's one I shared, I think, through Souls of Divergent. I think
Yeah,
that's their name.
like there's
And
so
I shared
many.
it with a couple of people, but like they do music.
Yeah,
and their activism is through their music.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's me.
And then they work with, or they donate whatever money they make to certain political advocacy commissions that do that. Well, they just focus on their music.
Yeah, I mean,
So I'm just like,
there's a lot of
I'm
ways
sorry,
to
go
do it, and I don't have a link or an idea of which episode, but I know above the fifth column broke it down or whatever, because like the people on the ground are like the spearhead or whatever, but there's like a whole there's a whole spear of other things, which is like there's a whole greater element of series of elements of people doing things with regards to activism. It's just, with regards to if it can get organized, if someone can start an organization, start to get people together, and then the people can, use their connections to bring other people into the group, and not everyone has to know each other, so long as everyone can work together and organize actual action, and then some people will go to the on the ground protests.
there seems to be another thing that kind of goes back to the individualism thing. I'm not 100% sure because it seems like there's a lot of people who refuse to like people who like even have some or show some inkling of like, okay, well, I want to be connected with this group or I want to be connected with that group. It's like kind of a, I don't know. It's like, no, but we don't want, this person. It's like I guess there's a justified distrust, but like, I don't know. I think that might be another thing that connects to individualism a bit because, well, when it comes to like making those new connections and bringing them into the groups, or even not even just activist groups, but like friend groups. Like, I don't know. I kind of wonder how much of that is prevalent.
Well, we do. We unfortunately look like we're wrapping up because Mr. Clock on the Wall says.
Well, I will reset that clock. I will punch that clock down from where it's at, which is not, the audience can't even see the clock. I will punch that clock because I have it covered up on top. I mean, the audience saw the timer saying 10 minutes, but like, yeah, I will punch that clock down and reset it. So, you know what? I'm going to do that right now, just for ease.
Okay.
Oh, what? Okay. Da, 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 da. Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh. Hold on.
Yeah, let's.
My views all skewed.
But James will be here in a minute.
I do find activism to be every time you stand up and say no. And
Yeah.
sometime, or sit down and say no. That's
Yeah.
One thing I learned in Standing Rock, actually, during Standing Rock, was that everybody has a place in the revolution. And a lot of times, those what they call keyboard warriors are doing a lot behind the scenes to get things done, to raise awareness, to get things talked about, to make sure the discussions are being had. You know what I mean?
Yes.
it's yeah. My marching days are quite over, so that's
Yeah,
what-
back when I could, I used to.
I have not done a lot of that, so I am essentially trying to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I had my own stuff to deal with, and survival kind of was more of a focus, and now that's slightly less of a focus. I've been more motivated to reach out to communities that I care about.
Oh.
But yeah, but this is one of those things where, like, I guess a part of me, even though I haven't had a lot of experience with activist groups, I almost feel like no activist group would be excessively harsh like that. Like some people who may have done some help might get, or have like some ideal of how you're supposed to do activism, even though that's not what activism is.
Like I don't remember, it was before the show started, but I said that I'm old enough. My first activism was with the National Anti-Draft Network, so
Yeah.
that's my age. And there were some that, you know, if you're not prepared to put a bomb under the recruiting office, no, I am not prepared to do that. Thank you very much.
Right? I have lines
Yeah,
I
you can go do
draw.
that, but no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I remember getting asked that once by a guy that I suspected was a bigger member of the IRA than he actually let on to be. And he asked me that, what is it that you would do for the revolution? And
This doesn't
I
sound
just kind of chuckled and said, I am not that person that goes forward and sets any timers or does any of that bullshit. I'm one of those people that sits there and counsels the people who do that bullshit.
I set timers, but only for, you know, baking cookies for the revolution. I will bake
good. Yeah,
cookies.
there you go.
I don't
You
know
make it to the
necessarily
revolution, that's
if this is worded the best, but Isaiah was wondering, Joey, what sort of community exists in your culture before the arrival of capitalism and Europeans, or whatnot. It's probably not worded the best, but yeah.
What? Repeat the question.
Okay, so Isaiah, it, like I said, it's not worded the best, and like if I read that, I know Isaiah means well, but Isaiah agrees it's not worded the best. Anyways, Isaiah says, this is for Joey. What sort of community exists in your culture before the arrival of capitalism and the Europeans?
Oh, I call it communism. Kind of a riff off of Lakota and communism stuck together.
Yes.
And I call myself a Lakami because it's basically a form of anarcho-communism. There were personal belongings. You had personal belongings. Everybody has personal belongings.
Yeah.
But while nobody wants to use your toothbrush or your underwear, there's things in your personal belongings that you could give away if you wanted to. Like useful things, sets of tools and things of that nature. There's useful things that we can just give away, and that's what Lakota people did on the regular. So if you didn't have, say you were, something happened to your teepee and everything in it burnt up. Somebody who has more than one teepee is going to squish extra family members into their other one and give you their extra teepee. Because you shouldn't be without belongings. And because you probably lost all of your sewing tools, somebody is going to give you a sewing kit or piece you together enough pieces to make you a sewing kit. Because you lost all of your belongings, you lost, extra, weapons and things of that nature. Somebody's going to gift you those, and it's something to use until you make your own. Or it can just be in replacement of what you can make on your own. But that was the kind of lifestyle that you had. There was nobody stealing anything. There was nothing to steal. Stealing wasn't even a word. There was no word for stealing. There was no word for crime. There was no word for criminal. There was no word for prison. The closest that you had was you could get expelled from your tribe, and that may or may not be a death sentence. If you're Lakota and you get expelled from your tribe, you can go to other tribes and prevail upon them for help. And there's a lot of other people who would accept you in, because being Lakota wasn't exactly easy. And it depended on what you did. And it depended on how truthful you were being about what you did. But that's the closest thing it comes to punishment, is you got kicked out of your tribe. Which is a really bad, sucky thing to happen when you have like all of your family and friends, you no longer get to see them. You're kicked out. They can't be around you unless they're away from the chief, because that's usually the person who's keeping you at bay. Like, that's the closest thing that is to repercussions to doing anything for your behavior, for bad behavior. And so it had to be something pretty extreme to get yourself kicked out. Really extreme. For the most part, people were just well behaved. It's part of what I guess you might call a social contract.
That makes sense. The society still has a long way to go to reach something closer to that, which honestly is better in most ways.
I mean, it wasn't coming up roses. There was still a lot left to be desired, and especially when you start, talking about, well, there was a certain amount of ableism where if you were neurodivergent, you were probably okay. But if you were born with a physical handicap in some way, you could be in terrible danger from the moment that you are born. Because we're talking about a people who would leave babies out to the elements. because they couldn't survive. And that was something that you like decided as a parent whether or not this kid was going to survive, how much effort you were going to put into rearing this kid. And you made that decision on your own as parents. Nobody else made that decision for you. But you made this decision based on whether or not you thought this kid was going to be able to survive the lifestyle that you're going to have to lead, which is one of walking everywhere. We're nomadic people. You have to be able to carry everything on your shoulders, and you have to be able to walk. It doesn't leave any room for people who are disabled.
What?
It just doesn't. And so, like, things like that have to be overcome in my
Like
culture, in the way that I think about things, because I grew up with a lot of ableism. And so I have to, like, a lot of it's internalized, because being disabled myself now means that it's very difficult for me anyway. It means that it's very difficult for me to reach out, for example. That's one thing I have a big issue with, reaching out for help. I always feel like I'm asking too much of the people that care about me, even though I may not have asked anything of the people who care about me. Just asking for help, you know, is already like, I'm already thinking in terms of, oh, I'm going to be a burden. You know, it's an automatic thing that goes off in my brain, and something that I have to get over, because I can't help as much as I used to. I have to be helped more than I used to. And that is just going to continue changing over time. Because with time, I will become more disabled, not less disabled.
Yeah.
So,
Which, that reminds me, it is all it, I mean, well, two things. One is, mutual aid is still a helpful step towards some of that stuff. I see that with, like, the ability to potentially get free stuff that you need with regards to disability stuff here in Minnesota, at least. I found at least one place that does that, mutual aid for wheelchairs, canes, and all that jazz. And two, we are past the end time. So
past the end time. That sounds so ominous.
yes,
Did people get raptured while we were on?
You're not gonna do the as long as you don't do the end time song that was on Jim Baker's show, then we're good.
yeah, no.
Okay, so for anybody who doesn't understand that, there was a guy, a singer in one of his shows or whatever, who basically sung My Girl, but like changed the lyrics to sing about end times, which made it like super cringe. So yeah, don't do that.
No, I will go a step.
Don't do that.
I will go a step further cringe, and I will start to grab
Rickroll it?
my pirate character sheet from D&D, and I wrote down a bunch of sea shanties, and I think I have one for when the ship is leaving, specifically because each sea shanty has its own role. No, I'm not going to do that, but like, I'm just threatening you that I could.
Oh, keys.
Oh, now you're asking for it. Okay.
No, it's all right. All right.
It's a Capstan song. Randy Dandio.
Oh dear. Okay.
You're It's okay. I won't. I'm good. You attempted to call my bluff, and that I pushed back with the actual song. No, but anyways, Joey, where can people find you? Is there anything you want to promote?
They can find me on Facebook at Joey Taksha Hushte.
Okay, I can add that.
Good luck trying to spell that.
Well, I can add to the description if you want.
Yeah, you could if you want to.
Yeah. I asked you earlier and you didn't say anything, so I didn't add anything yet. Whatever. I'll remember to do that after the show, or I will do it right now, because my brain, it's just realized I could pull it up right now. Anyways, James, what about you?
Well, you can find my YouTube channel here at BeastNation XIV, where I have some of my music on here. I also have BeastNation as my DeviantArt. I'm on Instagram as BeastNation 2023, and I'm also on Facebook. And my Facebook can be found in my About section of my YouTube channel. So.
Wait, did I miss one of yours? Whatever. I'll figure it out. Christy, where can people find you, and is there anything you're working on?
I don't know if anybody can find me right now. I am not of this world anymore.
Oh no, you've been raptured.
You can't see me. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not on Twitter. I mean, I am on Twitter, probably, but I haven't gone back. I like it. It's just that, yeah, I haven't gone back in a while. I'm on Facebook a couple times a week.
Do you want me to add your Facebook to the description?
Nah.
I didn't see it there for sure.
No, don't. That's
Oh,
more
don't?
that's more for people I want to interact with directly.
Okay.
And I'm getting enough chasers as it is.
Hey, Chrissy, do you mind if I add you there?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, because I thought about it, but I was like, yeah, I don't know. Are they standoffish? But yeah. All right, I'll make sure to shoot your request here later after your show.
Okay. Yeah, and so nobody can find me right now, and I am still working on the comic book thing, which was such a greater task than I had possibly imagined. And I'm finishing a novel, so that's also on my brain.
Okay. You can find me here. I'm not. There's a lot of places I'm not anymore. I think I'm still on. I'm probably not gonna show up in Twitch for the next couple weeks. I'm on Mastodon co-host and
Oh, you stopped talking.
well, yeah, sorry. I was typing in response.
Sorry.
Sorry.
There was a glitch.
A glitch in the system. Oh yeah, Tumblr. Occasionally on Tumblr, Mastodon co-host. I'm probably not gonna show up much on YouTube or Twitch. Or I'm not gonna show up on Twitch for a couple weeks, and there won't be a show next week because I will be doing some stuff with Never Again Action.
Cool.
Because I don't like anti-immigration stuff, and there's a lot of opportunity in this particular case to learn as well, and hopefully I can better understand stuff so I can better talk about stuff with regards to immigration. And in my mind, the easiest way is to at least try to be there in a protest once. So yeah. So with that said,
Well, first, be safe at Pride.
Yep.
yes, that
Yes.
very much so.
Okay.
And your
Hello?
voice matters, your life matters,
Li-
and you
life,
matter.
Life voice you. And I even told you the reason I ordered it that way.
I mean, I'm sure you have, and I'm sure I have forgotten. Look, the end of the day
It's okay.
is the least likely part of the day that I'm going to remember. The end of the show, especially. I don't know, my brain already in one ear, out the other. Your life matters, your voice matters, and you matter.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe not completely in one ear and maybe not completely out the other ear. And take care of yourselves, everyone. Bye.
All right, you too. Have a good night.